Hi, I'm Samir Jain. As we approach the anniversary of 9/11, I'm going to offer my take on politics as well as my unabashed advocacy for President Trump's re-election. In another video, I had outlined my ideological support for the Republican Party, but today I'm going to tell you how we will win. We have 2 months to get there. And sure, I looked at some poll numbers. Biden's poll numbers seem to be higher, but they're higher within a margin of error. Hillary Clinton actually had a similar lead in 2016, so we should take these numbers with a grain of salt. The other difference is I expect a much higher turnout this year, even as high as 70% or so, despite the corona pandemic. And that's because most registered voters who support Trump would rather vote in person. These guys are going to turn out. Very few prefer to vote by mail. And those who support Biden, they've been saying that their preference is to vote by mail. All this is good, but the risk is we may be getting into an election night where whoever wins, but as postal votes come in, we risk chaos, and that's a big risk. That's a big serious challenge to our democratic process, one that some guys seem to be counting on, and it is not us, the Republicans. A lot depends now on the 3 debates that are coming up. All we need is Biden to falter, to commit his usual gaffes in these debates. This said, the undeniable reality, however, is that President Trump has made people angry, and his messaging has been a little off. So for Biden supporters, their opposition to Trump is by far they support Biden, not because they see too much good in Biden. And he's been around 40 years in public life, and age, health woes take a toll. His mental faculties are now visibly impaired. And I'm not being disparaging here, is the truth. So he now relies on things like the heart, compassion, projecting an image of gravitas. But the real question is, can he govern for 4 years? And that's a legitimate question that's on people's mind. And I say he can't. So Biden has taken on this new message of unity, one nation under God, all of us working together, and all of this is very superficial, and that seems to be resonating in those places where violence is happening, in Portland, in Chicago. So their efforts have really created deep American political process polarization. This culture wars that have been going on have been accentuated. So the way this thing has been spun around is that this election is going to be determined by what folks think of Trump and not of Biden. I think it's going to be a lot more. It's going to be where things stand on COVID, on the economy, on race and violence, on how this Black Lives Matter movement paves out in our communities. And meanwhile, you have the likes of AOC, Kamala Harris, Sanders, all of these guys that are moving the agenda to a radical left from what was centrists. So these guys are very different from Biden, and these guys have hijacked Biden's agenda. He is not centrist anymore. So radical left's calls to defund the police, to eliminate cops, to direct proceeds to social security, to social programs, all of these haven't resonated well with the American people. We still have a very favorable view of Black Lives Matter, but nobody wants to defund the police that the Dems have been screaming for. The media itself is very, very partisan. Have you ever seen the New York Times publish one good positive story about the Republican Party and Trump? We don't have any objective news sources anymore. And this media has begun to punish thoughtful dialogue. And in order to counter that, I like what Trump does. Trump's tweets now are more important than newspapers, and he sends tweets often. So that's what's helped us promote and set this agenda and to make this this last run to the elections impactful. Supporters of the Democratic Party care about climate change, abortion, contraception, healthcare, race, ethnicity, the public health impact of the coronavirus outbreak. And these are legitimate things to care about. But there are many issues that voters care about that are higher in the hierarchy, and the ones that seem to be surfacing are: one, the economy; second, the jobs, which is the unemployment number, and about making ends meet, affording your next meal, racial and income inequality, and of course healthcare. So all this said and done, let's get down to the bottom line. This election is about the 127 electoral votes that matter in Arizona, in Georgia, in Florida, in Michigan, Minnesota, Carolinas, in the North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So Colorado, Ohio, Virginia matter, but they don't matter too much. Well, not too much from an electoral college perspective this year. So Trump must do well with rural voters. We must make sure that he does well in suburbs with white working class voters. Biden needs cities. He needs the African American vote. He needs more Latino voters. But in the swing states that matter, it's all going to be getting into the trenches. So Biden's advantage in the polls, which the media seems to be flaunting, is very much within the margin of error in half of these 8 states. In Arizona, there's a growing Latino population. There are some shifting attitudes with white college-educated voters that probably might be leaning Biden's way, but I'm not too sure. In Florida, it looks like the Republicans will win. In Georgia, the Democrats need Atlanta suburbs. They need a surge in black voter turnout, and that ain't gonna happen. Michigan, I'm not very sure. It's likely going Democrat this time around, and probably Minnesota too is going to stay Democrat. North Carolina has 15 votes, and it's going to be a Trump win all the way. In Pennsylvania, Biden is polling much harder, but these things can change very fast. Wisconsin, nobody can predict this time, and if anyone tells you they can, don't believe that. So what really are going to be Trump's path to re-election that we need to catalyze? So what are Trump's paths to re-election that we can facilitate? Let's start with black voters. They've largely voted Democrat, and they've largely self-identified themselves as Democrat. So black neighborhoods in key swing states hold a lot of power to reshape politics. But for Trump, non-voting black residents in key places have the potential to swing elections. From what I'm seeing is young black Americans might well sit things out in November. And this cohort hasn't really voted too much because they feel that their vote hasn't made much of a difference. And it hasn't really when it comes to the Democrats being voted into power. So if you swing this constituency, it can make a huge marginal difference to the Trump campaign. But I'm cognizant that this is going to be hard. He'll need to win the black female vote, which looks harder. So in some of these states, Alabama, Mississippi, Carolina, these states are really not in play, but Michigan and North Carolina are in play, and they have big black populations. So that is something that one needs to work some about. The other thing that's been in the news is school reopening. So Trump needs to find the middle ground with white women with kids who live in the suburbs. And this group has been justifiably very nervous and worried about Republican calls to send their kids back to school. So that's something we need to work on. And the third is white men, union, blue-collar workers. traditionally Democrat voters who Trump swung around last time, who voted for Trump last time because they never trusted crooked Hillary. So we need them to win. We need to bring them back. And all of this is really, if you look at the numbers, around 6 to 10% undecided voters in 11 states that are up for grabs, for whom perhaps Biden may be an appeal. That's the base we need to go after.